most people are just fine, does that mean that what these people are wearing on them is not something that harms it? Well, actually, studies have found, yes, it is. So it seems like you're being very, very careful in what you're saying, but you're not really giving the full whole picture of other things that are known about what's in our environments that do make people ill. And I just think that this whole thing is a farce, is what it really feels like. It's a farce.
Back to your study. What is DIMO? What have you guys tested positive for? Because none of us tested for that. But you guys had
dibromochloromethane.
Yeah, what is that?
That's another one of the disinfectant byproducts.
Oh, okay.
In the tap water.
So nobody in our town actually tested. It wasn't even detected here. I didn't even. Oh, here it is. The DIMO. Yeah, it was 4.
Yeah, that one is one of the total trihalomethanes that are most likely due to a chlorinated tap water supply.
So you guys have a bad tap water supply?
Not necessarily bad, but it might just be that the levels, we didn't take our tap water samples, all we did was the blood and urine samples for ours.
I'm Billy Ferris. I live on the corner of Tim Donald and Meadow Ranch. On the corner, we're out in the swimming pool all summer. I smell stuff every day. And I'm opening invitation to y'all to come back out and study some more to stay at the house. Because you had lived, you had that jetty to take off in your bedroom at 2 in the morning. Okay? It's very, very loud, and I don't understand. Actually, I think I've damaged my hearing because I've been home also all day long. So anything that's ever happened to that big station across the street from me, when I came out here, it was a pipe. That was 8 years ago. 8 pipe up out of the road. Now I have 3-foot holes running down through, what are they called? Under the ground. They've gone all the way up my front yard, side of my house, all the way up the back. And every time it goes off, it's like, oh my God, it's a knock out. It doesn't, it's very scary. It's very, very loud. And for the last 2 years, I've been trying to my ear. It has to be now. Because I'm at home, I don't do car shows, I don't do those cars, and then it does. So it's pretty like I have, you got your ears ringing every day. But for about 2 years, every day.
Excuse me, that high pressure gas line is what, 10 feet from your front door?
Yeah, it's way.
It's at the edge of the property line, about 25 feet.
Yeah, it's close. Thank you.
My first question was, when you tested a smoker, was it just one household you tested, or was it everyone in a household?
No, we only tested one person per household. So anytime there was a smoker, it was one person in the house that smoked.
Okay.
Or it was, there might have been other homes that had a smoker in the house, but we only tested one person per house.
And then on this, when these tests were done, was there any reference given to like the proximity to a well or a compressor station, or upwind or downwind? Was there any?
We did collect that information, yes.
And were the levels higher, closer to compressor or wells, or were?
We looked at the results compared to the exposure survey, and it didn't. Most of the stuff, I mean, most of it we could explain by some means based upon what they gave us in their survey. So we haven't actually done the calculation to see if there was a significant difference between the levels. We had a really small sample size, so it would be really hard to detect differences. But we can definitely go back and look at that information as well.
And so, like, if you were testing and you were testing the sample size, was it also in proximity to, like, which way the wind was blowing? If they were supposed to be, like, at home for 4 hours? Was there some kind of environmental information also gathered when you did that testing?
We did not collect air samples, but we did note, like, the wind direction and how close they were to the gas wells or any kind of compression, anything that might have been related.
Did that show any influence at all on your study?
It didn't look like it because we tested, pretty much everyone we tested lived close. I mean, as you can see, they're everywhere out here. So everyone we tested lived close to one of these stations, and we didn't find that everyone had higher levels. So I would say no, there was probably no association.
So I know when somebody goes to a doctor, like when you go to a doctor for the first time, they ask you, what are all the medicines that you're on? Because you might be on one medicine that's
Right.
good, but when you put two of them together, they're bad. So have there been any studies to say, well, this is a safe level, but when you add this level of chlorine, then that's a problem? Have there been any study in the combination of these chemicals on health effects?
Mixtures of chemicals in the environment is a relatively new area of focus that people are beginning to start looking at. We've got some information that looks at several mixtures, and some, it just depends on the chemicals and what you mix together. Yeah, some things, when you mix them together, you get a lot worse effects. Some things, they're just an additive effect. This one plus this one equals this one. Some actually counteract each other, and you get a less effect. And some, they're equal. It doesn't matter if they're mixed together or not, you get the same effect.
Cora Bell from Corinne. I have a question. I have a PhD, and I'm really concerned with the fact that you guys use 2003, 2004 averages. When are the new ones coming out?
That was the data that was available at the time, and I'm sorry, I don't know when the new information becomes available.
Okay, as a psychologist, it's really imperative to use current data when you are comparing something.
I agree.
And this is 7-year-old data that you are comparing to. That's a huge time frame for you to be using as a resource and a foundation for you to compare these statistics to.
That's the best information that we have available at this time.
It's flawed information. It's 7-year-old information, and my understanding is drilling in this area has been around for how long? Thank you. So not really pertinent to the statistics that you're pulling up and comparing to.
It's the best information.
Heavily flawed. The other thing is, though you say that you didn't have any children's statistics, why not be the first to come up with the statistics for kids? Why not do the kids?
We didn't have a control population.
You didn't have one. Make one.
We were limited by the amount of funding that we could use for this investigation.
Is that correct?
This because you're limited to a amount of funding. Our kids breathe, they drink water, they have blood. I mean, come on. Our kids are more important to my kids are more important to me than my own self.
I agree.
Sorry.
I'm 100% agree with you.
That money, it's all about the money issue. That's why my kids were left out in the cold.
Unfortunately, I know it's not a good excuse, but we can only do what we can do.
It's an
And we tried to
excuse.
test
You're
as many.
right. It's an excuse, and it's not a very good excuse. It should have been.
But you had funds. Sorry to interrupt. You had funds. You originally were going to test 50 people. You only tested a limited amount of that.
But we did not have a control group for this population. And so even if we would have tested children, we wouldn't have anything to compare it to.
But you would have found out if they had any of these chemicals in their system.
True.
And considering that most 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds don't put a cigarette to their mouth, I'd be highly concerned if any of these chemicals appeared in any of the children. So you would have had those results.
That's true.
Stand behind the letters that you're holding to your name.
I'm Gunner Sergeant Kendall Connell, where I live right over here. I want to say first off, I'm sure your study is great consolation. I saw another one 40 years ago that basically said the same thing about Agent Orange. And we all know how that turned out. Y'all came up, and I believe your word were you spent a couple of days with this.
That's correct.
Where did y'all stay on that?
We stayed at a local state contract hotel.
Oh, okay, so you left Dish for about 12 to 14 hours during this 24-hour period, and then came back for another 6 or 8 hours, and then took urine samples.